I think it's about time we start discussing the future of Dark Souls 3. A few days ago, VatiVidya released a really insightful video on what could possibly be the first installment in the DLC content that we have all been eagerly awaiting. In the video, he discussed a DLC which focused on Londor, which makes perfect sense. There's so much there to play around with, but I'll save you my thoughts on it. If you want to watch his awesome video, click here. Today I'm going to talk about what I think will be in the DLC, and we will not talk about Londor. Instead, we're going to be discussing the Deep. Now, why do I think we're going to have some content that centers around the Deep? Well, as you know, Dark Souls 3 takes heavily from Dark Souls 1. In Dark Souls 1 we went through the game and there was this thing that the NPCs and item descriptions kind of talked about and hinted at vividly, but it was merely fragments of what it would become. And this was the Abyss. Then we have the Dark Souls 1 DLC, Artorias of the Abyss. And this opened up a whole new world and added so much more depth into the world we had just endured. To sum it up, Artorias of the Abyss takes place many years before the events of the first game, in a strange land of Ulasil, and we're introduced to 3 of the 4 Knights of Gwyn, Lord's Blade Siran, Hawkeye Goth, and my favourite character, Artorias. But why is this important to us now? Well, in Dark Souls 3 we're introduced to this thing called the Deep. It's not the Abyss, well, we don't think it is at least. It's this entity that's formed this entire cult of Aldrich's faithfuls. I've got a lore video on Aldrich and you can check out that here, but we're not going to delve into the lore too much here, but of course there needs to be a reason behind the DLC, so I'm going to try and convince you that my idea might come to fruition. The Deep in Dark Souls 3 is something we know least about. Much like the Abyss in Dark Souls 1, like I mentioned earlier, because, well, and I've said it in the past, Dark Souls 3 needs Dark Souls 1 to make sense, lore-wise. And Dark Souls 2 didn't. It was its own game, in my eyes anyway. And I will defend Dark Souls 2 to my grave, but I digress. This upcoming DLC, it's basically a blank canvas for From Software to really explore and respond to the callback criticism. Now, we know the Deep is some form of ocean. Aldrich envisioned the entire world covered with this water or sludge, and for the current world to sink to the bottom and act as an anchor for humanity. But he grew scared of it. Something he dedicated his entire life to, formed this cult, gained all of these followers. When he finally saw what the Deep actually was, he grew terrified, and began consuming more and more to become more powerful, and to try and combat it. Again, we really don't know what appeared from the Deep, giving from this blank canvas. Now for those who've played Bloodborne, and especially the Old Hunters DLC, will know it's heavily influenced by H.P. Lovecraft. Now, envision this. We're talking about the Deep here. That screams Cthulhu references. It's just too good not to think about. Picture a boss, call it Lurker of the Deep or something like that, and it looks like this. I'd actually be very surprised if this topic isn't at all brought forward or not even explored in any of the future DLCs. I'd feel like it's such a wasted opportunity. It might just be me, but give us that big bad guy to fight. In Dark Souls 1 we had Gwyn, in 2 we had Nashandra, albeit Nashandra was a pretty crappy fight, and yes, I know I'm being nitpicky, but in Dark Souls 3 we didn't really have that memorable last bad guy. Sure, Soul of Cinder was cool and all, but it didn't feel, well, climactic, if that's the right word. Almost like Manus, Father of the Abyss. Give us that big bad guy to fight at the end. We want to kill this guy because he's caused so much destruction and devastation. Plus it was a difficult fight. In the DLC I really do hope it kicks the living shit out of us. If the Old Hunters is anything to go by, I have high hopes regarding difficulty, but as we've talked about before in the past, difficulty is highly subjective, so that's really down to you. So you know what I want, but where would we access this? Well, the Boreal Valley would be the safest bet, I'd assume. It's where we meet Pontiff and Aldrich, who have heavy ties to the Deep. And there's a couple of areas that are very familiar to Dark Souls 1 DLC's entrance. I might even hint at a timeline we're going to venture into. To access Dark Souls 1 DLC, it was tucked back out of the way and, well, what about here? Anyone else wonder why we have this wide open space when there's really nothing there? Perhaps a portal will open up and we'll venture back in time. Or even better, ahead in time. Perhaps we'll go to a timeline where the Deep has taken over. spawning these amalgamations that we could fight, slaying the Master of the Deep to stop it in our timeline. Time travel in anything is always a pain to discuss, and I'm just trying to keep an open mind and open as many doors as I possibly can. I think really after playing through the old Hunters and seeing what From Software can do with Lovecraft inspired design decisions, I just really want that to come to light in the Dark Souls universe, and the Deep is a perfect opportunity to do such things. Have I convinced you? What do you guys think of a Deep inspired DLC? I'd love to know your thoughts, and I just can't wait for the DLC to drop. Anyway, take care everyone, be good to one another, and have a great day.